Good evening, televiewers. Welcome to Prime R for this Wednesday edition, an edition that is dedicated to the nurses as they celebrate the International Nurses Week. We know that tomorrow is going to be the day dedicated to celebrate and valorize what the nurses are doing. We know that when we talk of the health sector, the key soldiers, frontline soldiers in this domain are the nurses. So this year's week and day is celebrated under the theme Nurses a Voice to Lead, Invest in Nursing and Respect Rights to Secure Global Health. We this evening are going to be looking at the value and respect that has been accorded to this very noble profession by our community. We're talking about Cameroon, Africa as a whole. What as the community given to our nurses as respect? How do the employers treat them? How are they trained? What are the organs responsible for regulating their activities? We're going to be talking a whole lot about the health, the nurses domain in Cameroon. We are discussing this with some persons who are in the studio with me. I have Mr. Ngang Nelson, who is the president of the Cameroon Association of Registered Nurses and Midwives. Good evening and welcome, Mr. Ngang.
Good evening, Mr. Kum. Good evening, fellow panelists. It's an opportunity once more for me to be on set to discuss the things I am so passionate about, to discuss things on the profession I'm so passionate about. I use this opportunity to say hi to every nurse outside there, and especially to the nursing students whom we look as the future for the nursing profession. Okay. Thank you.
We also are using this opportunity to say special greetings to you, the staff and workers of the Solidarity Hospital out there in Boya, and also to those of the International Community Reference Hospital, also called as the St. Pius Hospital in Boya. We are also in the company of Mr. Ntongiachu Daniel is the president of the Cameroon Association of Critical Care Nurses. We're glad to have you, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you so much, televiewers. We are glad to be here on this forum today to talk about the role nurses have as far as global health is concerned, and to my domain, critical care. We want to greet all the critical care staff who are practicing in all the areas of Cameroon, Africa at large, and also to thank them particularly as they took the opportunity to fight COVID during this time. Thank you so much.
Okay, we also are in the company of Mr. Ngang Peter Achu. He is the president of Ideal Nurses Association. Glad to have you this evening.
Good. It's a pleasure. It's my pleasure as well. Good evening, fellow panelists. Good evening, viewers. It's a pleasure to be here, and I seize this opportunity to greet all the wonderful nurses out there who are working so hard to be able to bring smiles on the faces of their respective clients. And hello to all the ideal nurses out there.
Okay, we also are going to be discussing with Geh Martin Alang, who is going to be participating from the United States of America on this edition of the program. He is the CEO of Caring Hands, operating in America. Good evening, Martin, and we're glad to have you on Prime R for the first time.
Hoping that you guys can hear me.
Yes, yes.
It's an honor to be part of this amazing discussion, particularly addressing issues with nurses and healthcare providers in general. I want to give a shout out to our nurses assistants, because they are often estimated and underlooked. But I want to give a shout out to them, and I want to give a shout out to all the nurses, whether or not you are a critical care nurse, an ER nurse, a flight nurse, whatever capacity that you are serving. I just want to give you a shout out. And Caring Hands Africa. That's the full name of my organization, just so you know.
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. We also are going to be having the opinion of the US-based nurse Anita Eno-Takang, who is also involved in many health activities out here in Cameroon. We also are going to be having the contribution of the administrator of Solidarity Clinic out there in Boya, since we had to talk about those who are managing health institutions. But Mr. Ngang, let me start with you. We are celebrating this year. Last year we celebrated, this year we're celebrating another theme which has to do with the respect for your rights, and in the context of global health. How have you people as nurses been treated by the Cameroonian and African communities?
Thank you once more for this opportunity. It would please you to know that from 2017 right up to 2022, the International Council of Nurses, which actually pioneers, which actually spearheads nursing around the world, has put as a theme leadership.
Okay.
It's actually put nurses in front. And for this year, it is not just nurses, the voice to lead. The sub-theme, like you see, has to do with respecting the right of nurses. You would bear with me that you can't talk with any one or two nurses without them telling you how their rights are disregarded. Most often we have looked at the patients. Of course, the nurses are there for the patients. Most often we have pointed fingers on how nurses maltreat patients, on how nurses don't carry out their responsibilities. But I think this year, ICN wants us to look at the fact that these nurses are not slaves. These nurses are not robots. These nurses are human beings and find themselves within a profession, and they have rights. And if we want them to function to their full capacity, if we want them to provide the standard of nursing that we expect from them, then also we have to respect their rights. Some of these rights, which I think we'll discuss in the course of the program, which has to do with something like the wage. You look around Cameroon, that one of the areas where nurses or nurses' rights are seriously abused has to do with the wage. You would not imagine a nurse, after going through school, finishing a program for 3 years after advanced level, is offered a pay of 30,000 francs in some cases, and sometimes it's not even paid regularly. These are some of the rights that have to be respected if we want these nurses to function at the standard that we expect them, so that we are satisfied.
Okay. Mr. Ngang Peter, yes, you are heading Ideal Nurses Association. Is that the impression you also have of the nurses in Cameroon?
Yes, just to support what my fellow panelist, Mr. Ngang Nelson, has said, nurses in Cameroon, like you know, most often, in terms of practice, where they practice, the clients do not respect them for several different reasons. And accusing fingers are pointed at them. For example, selling drugs. They are the last grade of personnel in hospital, the image that the population has of them. They also look at them as people who cannot be able to take care of themselves even in society, despite the fact that they work on a daily basis to save
But they are the
lives.
ones taking care of almost everybody.
Exactly. And nurses, just to tell you, nurses and midwives represent at least 50% of the health workforce, the world over, including Cameroon. And to be honest, nursing assistants as well work so hard to be able to bring smiles on the faces of their patients. And despite all this hard work, most at times, the only thing the population sees is the negative aspects of nursing. So at Ideal Nurses, it is important that we work hard to be able to build a positive image of nursing in Cameroon.
Yeah, but who has to build that image? The nurses themselves.
Of course, I would want to. I most often we think that it is a population that has a poor image. But personally, and from our own perspective, and having worked on the field for the number of years that I have, I think that nurses have a lot to do in order to build a positive image of themselves. Mm-hmm. Because first of all, it goes with self-awareness. Mm-hmm. A lot of persons get into nursing not for the passion of doing the work as nurses, but for other reasons, amongst which are financial motivation or finances, probably to make money, because they feel that nursing, even in Cameroon, especially out of Cameroon, pays better than other jobs. So nurses are to blame partly for the poor image of nursing. Because it is not surprising, for example, you go to a hospital or to a work environment and you nurses, instead of sitting and attending to patients, they sit and they are probably WhatsApping on their phone, mm-hmm. or looking at other aspects, or neglecting the patients when the patients call, for example.
Okay. Mr. Daniel, President of Cameroon Association of Critical Care Nurses, I don't know what the situation at your level is, but I'm sure this association has been working for some time now. What are the core challenges that nurses are facing when it comes to the respect from the community?
Thank you so much. The first thing I want to say is that I don't want to repeat what my colleagues have said, mm-hmm. with respect to wages, but I want to first of all say that there is little investment as far as critical care services are concerned. Mm-hmm. So nurses do not have the necessary equipments, they do not have the necessary materials to work with. And then secondly, just from the fact that we already have the general nursing domain, that is a challenge. These specialties do not really seem recognized. If you look at it, if you ask like the COVID pandemic, that we are still managing till now, you observe those who are taking care of the COVID patients, we call them critical care nurses. But during this time, you see that nobody recognizes the fact that they are the people who are important as frontliners in fighting COVID-19. And then, secondly, they are not being respected as critical care professionals. So there is general lack of recognition of the specialty as a whole, because you will see many people do not know much about critical care services and things like this. So the critical care nurses generally do not feel recognized, they do not feel respected, they do not feel that there is enough investment as far as critical care services is concerned. And worst of all, they are not feeling protected, which is one of the sub-themes that we have for this year. They are not feeling protected. Imagine during COVID-19, they do not have personal protective equipment to work with. And this is a big challenge as far as caring for the critically ill COVID patients are concerned.
Yeah, when you say critical care, many persons watching us may not understand. What do persons working in this domain do?
First, I want to talk first about who a critically ill patient is. Mm-hmm. A critically ill patient is somebody that has a life-threatening condition. It could be you might have a hypertension, say, but you are not having, it's not a critical illness. But when your life becomes threatened because of the hypertension, we say that you are a critically ill patient. When you have COVID-19, you are not a critically ill patient. But when your life becomes threatened because of the COVID-19, maybe you need oxygen, you need those support to your organs that are failing, we say you are a critically ill patient. Then those who take care of these people who are having life-threatening illnesses are those we call critical care staff, and the nurses, we call them critical care nurses.
Okay. What instruments are lacking? Because you say you guys are facing the challenge and you lack working instruments.
First of all, the personal protective equipments are lacking. Mm-hmm. during this pandemic. We are not prepared, mm-hmm. for the pandemic. So the general personal protective equipments are lacking. And then oxygen, which is a basic need, as identified by Virginia Hansen, Abraham Maslow, as a basic need, is not available 24/24 in most of our services. You will realize that there are some patients who die in the hospital not because actually these patients were supposed to die, but maybe because the oxygen was not available at that time that it was supposed to be administered to the patient.
Okay, Martin, I hope you are there. We are reading of what we are understanding. How important is the nurse as we speak as far as the overall health domain is concerned?
That's a very amazing question. Thank you for asking that question, Mr. Leo. I will start off by saying that Maya Angelou once said that as a nurse, we have the ability or the opportunity to heal a mind, a soul, a heart, and a body of all patients. They may forget your name, but they may never, ever forget how you made them feel. A nurse is the fundamental, is like the basic unit of every healthcare department, be it a hospital, a home health, or community nurse. Nurses are the extension of doctors. Nurses are extension of family. What I mean is we have the ability to nurture people back to life. We spend the most time with people. Without a nurse, it would be practically impossible for a hospital, because in many situations with my fellow nurses that are there and those who are watching, you will notice that the doctor spends between 15 minutes to 30 minutes with the patient. But we spend weeks, months, that same patient, depending on whatever circumstances that they find themselves. So nurses are the backbone of every hospital or clinic or community, because we are foot soldiers to deliver care to places that not even doctors are willing to go. Thank you.
Now, can we understand the place that has been accorded to the nurse in Cameroon, Africa in general, given the core place that he or she occupies in our community? You say without them, there is no foundation in the health domain. How do we understand that they are described like, I'm sure you are the one who said that, they are described like the last grade in our society in Cameroon?
I would rather say the question should be why the public has a poor perception of the nursing profession. We cannot try to change perception without addressing the cause of it all. The reason for the poor image may be multifactorial. And in Cameroon, because I also provide care to families in Cameroon in my organization when I come home during health mission trips, I do see the appreciative nature of the patients that I take care of. That is kind of surprising to me whenever I speak to a Cameroon-based nurse and they're telling me how disrespectful sometimes patients could be. And I begin to wonder what is broken in the Cameroon health society that is affecting patients so much that they are unappreciative of what is being offered them. And I think that one of the reasons why that perception is poor in Cameroon is the first thing is that poor media representation. You know, our media exposure is truly a reflection of current practice. You see, this contributes to the lack of public confidence. For example, we are not forthcoming when it comes to media outing. And I think that's why we're here today. Most nurses believe in doing their job, clock in, clock out, go home and get and rest and get back to work.
Why the doctor talks for them, seemingly. They are doing the job while the doctor... Yes.
I didn't hear your question.
I'm saying that the nurses shy away while the doctors should talk for them.
Right. Which is that it is we are working under the doctor, but we are independent practitioners to an extent. We're not like physician assistants. A physician assistant is somebody who assists the physician to do his job. Nurses are independent practitioners. We help the physicians. We do not assist them. We don't work under their license. We have our own licenses. So our voice is unique. We have to make our voices loud, particularly with this media representation. We have to get out there. It doesn't have to be on TV. Facebook or social media, whatever we do, my fellow panelists are all presidents of organizations. They have to be out there. The community have to know about us. They have to know that we are independent and we do not depend entirely on the doctor to function. The second issue will be, in some instances, we are being perceived as we lack of empathy. We have apathy, and poor delivery of care may also contribute to this poor perception. Why would a patient think that we do not have empathy? You see, this is a big one because many nurses today join the profession not because of the conviction that they have. Like one of the panelists said, they join it because of the paycheck. And once the paycheck is disappointing, the nurse loses their flame. They can't function, they can't give their 100%, they become frustrated with the organization, and as such, the nurse takes it out on the patient. Okay. And being that we are we're the face of healthcare, if you take it out on the patient, then it radiates to the entire community, and then we lack respect.
Okay. Let me get this one from a televiewer. It says that, Mr. Kum, the government has rendered nurses to beggars, peanut salaries, no consideration given to the profession. No hungry man can provide adequate services. Does it go back to the government? Must the government be the one to valorize what you are doing? How do you make yourself more valuable? That is changing the perception that the public has of not only the profession, but persons, also according greater value to what you do.
Thank you once more. Reacting to the viewer, I think it's a common song that we have, not just within the nurses, but other professions. It's like when something is not forth going in Cameroon, we tend to blame the government. Like the previous speakers have said, I think if we want the public to have a good image about ourselves, we, the nurses, have a lot to do.
Okay.
The fate of the nursing profession is in our hands. And of course, it's true, the government has its role to play, but there is so much more that we have to do, and which we have not been doing, which would go a long way to change the image of the profession. I thank God for the past few years. A lot of us, or some of us, have been coming up, like Mr. Martin said. Previously, you would see a nurse like the person who just walks and you hardly ever hear. And it's the doctors that stand to talk for the nurses. But that should not be the case. That should not be the case. And we have situations where it's even the doctors training the nurses. It's the doctors, and at the end, it's not actually nursing that is being provided. It turns out to be a kind of assistive medical care that is provided. So, yes, first of all, we the nurses have a lot to do to better this image, so that whether you're in the government, whether you're in the private sector, the private employer sees the value you have and knows that he has to pay you well.
Okay, you work to give importance and value to yourself so that not only the layman accords value to what you're doing, the government also understands that these guys are not to be reckoned with. But let's talk about your associations and the regulatory, about who actually regulates your activities in Cameroon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kum. That's a very pertinent question. When it comes to regulation, there are lots of questions and lots of loopholes. Of course, regulation, first and foremost, is the government that determines what direction nursing has to take in as far as nursing in Cameroon is concerned.
In line with the national health policy.
Exactly. The national health policy in line with the strategic plan of the Ministry of Health and other ministries that collaborate with the Ministry of Health to bring about health and well-being of the population. Secondly, we have the National Order of Nurses. That is the National Association of Nurses, Midwives and Health Technicians of Cameroon, what is popularly referred to as the National Order, that sets the pace as per the 1984 law that governs this association. It is the arm created to support government in order to bring about standards in terms of registration, because for now, one of the challenges we have is licensure. We do not have licensure in Cameroon. We register. And over the years, we realized that because of the lukewarmness of this association and because of its silence in terms of activities, because hitherto, when I started off my career, for example, we used to hear about scientific conferences organized by the National Order, year in, year out, but nowadays it is rare to even hear an activity that is carried out by the National Order. So, and then when we look at the law that governs nursing in Cameroon, still in 1984, it's been more than 30 years. A lot has evolved at the international scene as well as in Africa and other countries, including Cameroon. But yet, we are not moving. And so something needs to be done. In Cameroon, for example, like in other countries, the Nurse Practice Act, it is that document that gives you specification on what nursing is, who is qualified to practice nursing in Cameroon, and at what level, entry level should nurses, what is the entry level for nurses, and what are the sanctions, for example, if you go against the code of ethics for nurses and so on and so forth. But unfortunately in Cameroon, we do not have a Nurse Practice Act. And this is very challenging. And that is why anybody, anywhere, can put on a white coat and starts giving injections or prescribing medications and call him or herself a nurse. And this is a big challenge. When it comes to even health facilities and hospitals, we find even non-healthcare workers at the forefront. Business people have monopolized this particular activity, and because it is business oriented, most often than not, professional ethics, professional standards are not respected, and this is a big challenge. And this also goes to demotivate some of the nurses who want to give in their best to ensure that patients are well taken care of, families are well taken care of, and communities are well taken care of.
Okay, communities are well taken care of. Now, Mr. President, you guys are all presidents here. I'm the only person who is not a president. We are talking about the regulatory body. Now, training and higher institutions, they are very confident of the quality of those that are churned out from our respective higher institutions training nurses.
Thank you so much. I want to say that from what my colleague said about regulation, there are two things about regulation. That is the arm that is in charge of that regulation that has been given the power by the government, like the 1984 law, that is of December 5th, 1984, /9, which talks about the ability of the regulatory body to regulate the practice of nurses. And then same year that the law of 1984/10 talks about that act of regulating practice. But now the people that are supposed to actually be in charge of making this happen, they are the nurses. It means that if there is something in these documents that are not working well, they are supposed to do something to improve, to amend these documents so that it can suit the regulatory powers that they have. From my experience and what I know from other countries like Uganda, Kenya, really we are far back as far as regulating training in Cameroon is concerned. Regulating training, we have a lot of mix-up, a lot of funny things that are going on that you cannot really appreciate. We are not confident about the quality of nurses that are being trained by different institutions, but though there are some institutions that are doing quite their best, but majority are doing what they think they can do because it is not being regulated by the regulatory body. So the regulatory body has a key role here to play as far as controlling those who enter into the program, controlling those who, their programs, like during their semester exams, their practical training programs and things like that, and ensuring that the quality of training that they are receiving is quite adequate and necessary to meet the needs of these communities who are in need of nursing care. But unfortunately now it is not well done, and we think that something needs to be done, though we are already trying to make some efforts towards this line, like trying to make some contacts with the regulatory body, and we have had some discussions on what we think that is going to happen. Though the actions are not forthcoming as expected, but we think that it cannot be so rapid per se, but they are going to gradually come in place, hopefully.
Mr. Ngang, you think that something needs to be done as far as the training of nurses is concerned in Cameroon?
Obviously, a lot, not something. Okay. So much has to be done. But before I touch a bit on training, permit me add my voice to these aspects of regulation.
Okay.
Now, a typical regulatory body sets and supervises the application of standards from recruitment of students, training, and finally graduating or placing the students to work. And then not just that, but also following up to make sure
to monitor
that they still are within standards. And if we look at that, you realize that in Cameroon we don't have that body, so far as nursing is concerned, that follows up or that has that standard set in place, that follows up the students that are trained or that are recruited in different schools, follows up with the training, the different programs, how the training is done.
All is done under the Ministry of Higher Education.
All is done under the Ministry of Higher Education and the Ministry of Public Health.
Yeah.
And just to say, we have the Association of Nurses, Midwives and Healthcare Technicians, like Mr. Ngang Peter said, which is acting like the regulatory body. But then, because it's not able to carry out these aspects, we see its weaknesses. For example, nurses trained under the Ministry of Higher Education who come out with HNZ are not recognized by this association of nurses, midwives, and healthcare technicians.
Why?
But in the same country, these same nurses are recruited by the government. These same nurses, they live and go outside their country. They are recognized. So, as we discuss further, you realize that this is one of the main issues.
Why don't you recognize them?
We have in the nursing profession. Sorry, not me.
You are the president of the association.
Per se, no, not. It's the Cameroon Association of Registered Nurses and Midwives. It's different from the Association of Nurses, Midwives, and Healthcare Technicians.
Okay, that one is a government structure.
Yes, it's a
national order of
it's a government structure, National Order of Nurses, and under the arm of Ministry of Public Health. Now, concerning training, permit me say, some of us who choose the profession might have admired one or two nurses in those days who did well, who came in because they were passionate. And of course, the training at that time was rigorous. Down the lane, many things have changed. With the Ministry of Higher Education coming into training, and without the presence of this regulatory body to actually monitor certain things, we've had many persons who have come in with a more business mind, such that you have students who go to school today, the next minute they have certificates. You have persons, you have schools without skill laboratories. You have schools where you have no nurses handling major nursing courses. And at the end, what you give in, you actually expect it out. Okay, at the end, it's more
this is an observation you are bringing here. Are you engaging those involved in these activities? You people are presidents. Are you engaging either government or some arms to look into this? Because these are schools that are training healthcare providers, especially critical cases. How do you handle critical cases when you are not well baked at the level of schooling?
That's a very interesting question, Mr. Kum. And that remark made by Mr. Ngang Nelson is very important, because since 2009 in this country, HND nurses, HPD nurses, and baccalaureate nurses are not registered into the national order. I think registration started just barely, I think, a year or two ago for degree nurses. And discussions are ongoing, and for now, I think part of that problem has been partly solved, because in a recent discussion, one of the members of this association, one of the leaders, he made me understand that sooner or later there will be a common examination for baccalaureate nurses, degree nurses, in order to be registered into the order. Because as long as you are not registered into the order, it means that you don't have a legal premise to practice nursing in Cameroon.
You don't have a legal premise to practice. A US-based nurse, together with nurses based in Cameroon, had this to say. She thinks that bridging the gap in the practice of nursing, says nurses should take the theme from the International Nurses Association seriously by putting the best of the education in practice. Okay? Association seriously by putting the best of their education in practice. She went further to say employment as a nurse is not limited to the hospital. Corporate offices, schools, prisons, churches, banks, private persons, and more should open doors and employ nurses. Furthermore, hand washing as the first line of defense of contracting diseases should be practiced at all levels, and especially when care is given from one patient to another. Anita Enotakan has these thoughts. I'm going to be coming back to you. But let's get over to Martin. Lots and lots of questions, worries expressed with the formation of the frontline soldiers in the health domain. As we speak, what should be done to turn things around so that we get very equipped and trained persons to be able to handle the health care of our population back here in Cameroon?
The first thing is this. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Before we even go into what can be done, let's look at the disparity, the salary disparities between Cameroon nurses and nurses in, say, somewhere in America. You know, people truly believe that nurses are angels in comfortable shoes. But is this really a true statement, though? A nurse in Cameroon makes a monthly salary of about 41,000 francs. On average, annual pay of 515,000 francs.
Facebook does not have volume. Why?
Now, how is this a comfortable shoe? That means that a nurse is expected to pay their bills and buy their uniforms and personal equipment to help them do their job with a salary of 41,000 francs. This is the most frustrating part of nursing in Cameroon. Most of the patients that come into the clinic or hospital have fundamental perception that nurses and doctors are in comfortable shoes, that they are comfortable in their lives, to an extent that they are willing to extend that comfortability to them as patients. So patients who are suffering are focusing on their pain and their health conditions, not from the stress or the frustrations of nurses. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because Cameroon has a lot to do, not just with training. With that kind of a salary, how do you expect even those who are working right now to be able to mentor another person who one day is thinking of becoming a nurse? Who can go to high school and tell a high school child, when you grow up, you'll be a nurse because you will get paid 41,000 francs? They would rather probably not do that because they want to hawk peanuts and other used clothes on the street and make more money than become a nurse, which is supposed to be a noble profession. In the state of Michigan, for example, in the United States, an average salary for a nurse is, for a nurse assistant alone, is $31,000, which is about 17 million francs. And a nurse makes $73,000 in the state of Michigan, which is 45 million francs a year. I will say it again, that if you take care of someone like you would like to be taken care of, a patient will most likely recognize that. But how do we get to that point if the Cameroon government, the Cameroon institutions doesn't come together, particularly the Ministry of Public Health or the Ministry of Health? They have to set those structures from the top down, set the structures to be able to, not just one person deciding on which minister goes where, which health department delegate is being transferred somewhere. No, they have to set a comprehensive structure from the top down, protecting the patient all the way up to the physician. How can they do that? The three presidents, my fellow panelists, have to put pressure, including myself, who is out here internationally, to influence the Cameroon government, because everything is in a bottleneck. Nothing can be done in Cameroon unless a government official signs up on it. In other countries, it's not like that. The nursing boards are being controlled or run by private organizations. They bring a balance. The audit. But in Cameroon, everything is within the hands of a board. It's within the hands of the government. One person who is sitting in their homes makes all the decisions, and then the people are paying for it. The patients, the nurses, the doctors, the nurse assistants, the respiratory therapists, they're all paying the price. But if they can set a structure where the nursing board is an independent body, runs its nursing affairs, decides on the curriculum on nurses, sets the board exam, and determines who is getting into the national order by a nursing board. And then the physician have their physician board. But all these things will be coordinated under the umbrella of the federal government Cameroon,
okay,
or democratic government Cameroon.
Okay. We don't have a federal government in Cameroon. There's a federal government in America, not yet. I wanted us to...
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kum. I think that's a pertinent reaction. Mm-hmm. You know, most often, I mean, people think that nursing is reduced to bedside nursing, they say. Or we have reduced nursing to caring for patients in the hospitals. But it's far beyond that. And it is because of this myopic mindset that most of us, when we graduate, we want to only look for jobs in the hospital, and when they are not there, we think they are not, the opportunities also are not there. My friend, Mr. Ngang, the president of Ideal Nurses, can testify. He's one of those who worked in the hospital, and of course, who has worked in an NGO and had so much money. Though he's still to give me some of that. Okay, here's an example of some of the nurses, okay, who have walked out of the hospital and have earned so much until a point where he even said, no, I want to do other things.
So this is something that is lacking in the orientation on for children who want to do nursing. They very little among them understand that there are very huge opportunities for nursing away from the hospital.
Exactly, Mr. Kum. Like has been said, we need this paradigm shift in as far as the mindset, identify the problems that exist and propose solutions. In one of the conferences I attended, there is this young dynamic nurse who has started a home health based care for clients, and she is breaking bounds. For example, in Ideal Nurses, just like the panelist, Mr. Ngang said, we have started an initiative of a magazine, the Ideal Nurse magazine, for example, that tries to harness the talents of young nurses that are graduating from school to be able to write and make money for themselves. We pay for articles. We encourage nurses to be able to create opportunities not only for themselves, but also to employ others, and not only depending on government or depending on the private sector for their livelihood.
Okay, we're going to take a short break before we take that short break, let's take a listen to the administrator of Solidarity Hospital, Boya.
It's a pleasure for me to participate on this program as we commemorate the International Nurses Week from the 6th to the 12th of May this year under the theme Nurses Make a Difference. I want to salute the effort of nurses all over, that's from Solidarity Hospital, nurses in Cameroon, all kinds of emergencies, be it times of pandemic, viruses, epidemics. Nurses are there to provide health care, quality health care to the public. This, I salute you all. I appreciate you. And I ask you to be strengthened and tap your joy for the lives you save. Thank you very much, Solidarity Clinic staff, nurses in particular. As we celebrate you, remember that deep in our hearts, we know that you are the heroes and heroines when it comes to health care. More grace to your elbows and have plenty of fun as you celebrate your International Week.
This edition of Prime Hour is proudly sponsored by Solidarity Hospital Boya. This edition of Prime Hour is proudly sponsored by International Community.
Welcome back. You're watching Prime on My Media Prime, and this day is dedicated to nurses as they celebrate the International Nurses Week and Day, which is going to hold tomorrow. I don't know whether the nurses are going to march. Are you organizing feast? We'll talk about that at the end of the program. But I want us to look at the way employers treat the nurses. Have they accorded the rights? Do they respect the rights of nurses? Because that is also where it starts.
Yes, thank you. When you talk of rights of nurses, for instance, the right of nurses, one of them is a right to a due wage. With respect to his or her level of training, and then competencies and performance. But generally, this is not being respected. I just want to take us back to what our colleagues were talking about. I always do not want to point direct fingers just to the government. Let's take, for instance, the labor offices. I remember my experiences in some of the private institutions where you have a complaint that your wage is not proportionate to your level of training, competencies, and the services that you are delivering. The labor law delegates say, come sit in and also go take some coffee with the hospital administrators, come back and tell you, no, it's okay, you don't need to bother so much about this, it is your negotiation, you just need to understand. And so, generally,
higher education and public health ministries all doing training, yet they don't want to harmonize practice, but rather competing. How can this be handled or explained? It just helps reduce our value and respect. They are seen as beggars because of poor pay package. Nurse Passy for real. Writing from Bingo, Bamenda. Good evening, sir. This is Achi Ronald Attingem from Bamenda and Bingo Baptist Hospital. My questions are this: why should the training of nursing be entrusted into many ministries in Cameroon? Public health, vocational training, higher education. Why should a state registered nurse who does the same training or more training than an HND nurse not be qualified to do degree in nursing? What influence does the nursing regulating bodies like the associations have on profession with respect to the government? I don't know whether any of you have answers to the questions asked already. Good evening, Mr. Kum Leonard. And nurses are not respected in Cameroon because many see the physicians as demigods. Secondly, how will you expect a patient whose weekly pays is twice the monthly pay of the nurse to respect this noble profession? Philip, watching from Yaoundé. Hello, Mr. Leo. This is Na Derisu from Yaoundé. I really appreciate the efforts that you people are putting in place to see that a nation should change. Okay? Thank you for that. Good evening, Mr. Leo. Nurses are not respected in Cameroon.
We all are aware the nurses are supposed to have, and nothing good is forthcoming. However, I would beg your permission to say it is also because some of the groups of nurses, some of the persons we looked up to as leaders too, kind of failed us. Okay. And that's why I am happy that this generation, we have many young people who have decided to take the bull by the horn. Okay, I remember in my days back in school, you would not see a young lecturer, and of course we looked more often to those senior nurses. But then most of them too were at the level of the diploma. Mm-hmm. And so at certain points you really would not see them compete maybe with the medical doctors. At certain points they easily gave up. Yes, it's the changes have not taken place as we would have wanted, but I think the generation of leaders we have today, not long from now, we would see things changing, because as we speak to you, a letter has been deposited in the Ministry of Higher Education concerning some of these things, and some of these things happen not because.
And secondly, they will get fulfillment. So at the point where they get in and they have this reality shock, realizing that it is not what they were expecting right from the very beginning, they get this reality shock and it becomes challenging. And so one of the things, another point is the fact that nursing is draining. And just like this theme for this year puts it, nurses, a voice to lead, invest in nursing, to respect rights, to secure global health. So we need to invest even in us, ourselves, the nurses, because you cannot imagine what it feels like for a nurse to accompany a dying patient. And sometimes nurses who work in critical care, nurses who work in the reanimation wards, nurses who work in hospitals that take care of very critical patients undergo, even for themselves, a lot of psychological challenges. It is not easy to witness somebody die every day of your life, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so they also need to take care of themselves. There are very little resources that are put in place to accompany these nurses to psychosocially to improve on their health. And so sometimes, because of the work overload, because of the stress related to their job, they tend to shout it out, not only to other colleagues, but to the very vulnerable patients that they are otherwise expected to protect and to advocate for. So,
watching, that might be disgruntled with nurses. I think it was Pascal who stated that nurses get frustrated. One thing that I want to indicate to these people who are watching is that there's what we call compassion fatigue. You give and give and give and give a bit of yourself every day you go to work and take care of patients. And you have to address even their family issues that might have brought them into the hospital. Now they're dealing with a mental health challenge. Nurses get compassionately burnt out. And their coping mechanisms, it's kind of hard to explain. And that's why sometimes you see a nurse that will behave harshly towards a patient, towards a family member, because they're trying to combat that fatigue. They try to deal with their own trauma and frustrations. I challenge the nurses, the family members and the patients and our community, first, to try and walk in the shoes of nurses. When you go to receive care, be empathetic. Walk in the shoes of a nurse. As a patient or family member, regardless of your financial status, because I know in Cameroon it's all about what I have. Who be you to talk to me like that? It's about status. You must be empathetic to the nurses because of, if there's one thing you must understand, is that we are people too. We have conscience too. We cry too. We hurt just like you do. We get sick too, just like you do. So help us nurses to serve you better by acknowledging the efforts that we give to you. The second thing I would say is that be encouraging to your nurse. Remember that if you are encouraging to your nurse, she or she will provide the best care that you can ever have. Don't speak down on your nurse because you make more money than that.
From their duty as prescribed, they get the corresponding consequences, which is lack of respect and regard because it's oath-breaking. This is Mr. Umaru Sanda Adamu, writing from Bomenda. Good evening. I think the nurses need to protect each other and demand safe working environment. How can nurses celebrate their day when a nurse is in jail for simply doing her job? It's a shame that the nursing body have not mentioned a word about what happened to their colleague at Doctors Without Borders, okay? I don't know what happened to them. Okay, Mr. Kum, oops, error there. Sincerely, good evening, Mr. Liu. I think for sure we're lacking a nursing act of regulatory body because there is a lot of confusion. I see the Nursing Association in Cameroon as a human appendix. Okay, human appendix. I don't know what that means. Good evening, sir. I am pleased to take part in your program. My name is Fu Miranda, and I am happy to celebrate the Nurses' Day. As one of the students' nurses, I think a nurse is like a second God, meaning we have the ability to treat and help patients also. Nurses helps in nourishing and spending more time with the patients. So I think nurses are great caring. Okay, good evening, Mr. Kum. Liu and able nurses in the panel. Kudos to Mr. Liu for another wonderful program. Should a nursing mother of 5 months who just found out she is pregnant,
a management role that the person needs to take. And for me, I always feel that saying nursing officer, nursing director makes the work looks easier. So they need to take leadership in terms of educational programs, in terms of training, practice, and research. And so many things as far as leadership is concerned. Leadership is not only being a president. as you said, everybody must not be a president, but being a leader, you can lead from the side of the bed, you can lead at any point as far as the continuum of care of patients are concerned. Okay. And talking about investing in nurses, we need to invest by providing job opportunities for nurses and making sure that they receive the best that they can receive from caring environments and things like this. Let me just give you an example here. When we talk of the referral system, the pre-referral system as far as critical care is concerned, like we have ambulance system. Supposing that somebody has a cardiac arrest, say in this your environment now, what happens to that person? Knowing that if something is not done within, say, 10 minutes of the cardiac arrest to that person, the person can die. And then also take, for instance, people who have accident on the road in town. Who is supposed to transport these patients in the hospital? Imagine that somebody takes an initiative as a rich Cameroonian, decides to invest in ambulance services that does this work very well. It's going to create employment for everybody. It is going to create employment, particularly for the nurses. And it is
20 years as a nurse assistant. You've worked for 10 years as an HNC nurse. And of course, the investment means that you should start investing in yourself. You invest in yourself to have a degree, if you had a diploma. You invest in yourself to have a master's degree or so. Investing in ourselves, in this case, may not only be financial, it also has to do with spending quality time to make sure you know more, you get more knowledge, you get more experience, which you use in the care of the patient. And now to the employers, there is something that is very common in private sectors. I worked in one or two private institutions where most often they want to squeeze every juice from the workers. And sometimes when the employees seek opportunities to go for higher education or for further education, they threaten them with a termination letter. And so investment also means, at the level of the employers, also mean that they should open up and give opportunities for these employees, because if you want more from this employee, then the employee obviously should be given opportunity. And in some cases, you even facilitate. We've seen institutions.
Nursing and respecting rights to secure global health. When you are going through school, you must invest by following your training, your program, and also doing research to ensure that you become competitive, not only nationally, but internationally. And so your value, because when an employer is employing you, the question he asks is, what is your added value to my organization or to my team, for example? And so you must invest by taking your courses seriously as a student. It all begins right there. And secondly, when you graduate, what is your price tag? What is your worth? You determine your worth. When we go into a shop, for example, to buy a dress or a pair of shoes, there is a price tag on it. And then even if you have to bargain, you know you can't go below a certain level. So we need to determine our price tags based on our knowledge, our experience when we are looking for jobs, or when we are creating what you need to determine your price tag. How much can I pay myself, or how much do I expect someone to pay me, for example? So once you determine a good price tag for yourself, based on your value, you are investing in yourself, and others will respect you for that. Also, work-life balance, motivation. As nurses, we need to strive to make sure that we motivate ourselves and also motivate our fellow colleagues, and not only wait on the employer to motivate in terms of finances. And
nurses, as organizations, you need to think about your nurses, do some investment as far as this is concerned. Let me just give you some case example from my organization, the Critical Care Nursing Organization. When the COVID-19 pandemic started, we made a training program for a short course that was for about 90 hours to facilitate the nurses and physicians to be able to take care of critically ill COVID patients. And we were able to train more than 200 medical staff, including nurses and physicians, who could take care now of the critically ill patients. And let me just say another one from the perspective of the things that we need to use in our practice. For instance, we identified in some institutions they needed oximeters, that is to take the oxygen saturation of patients to know whether they are desaturating, to be able to provide them oxygen. And we were able to talk to some people, to some organizations, and they were able to support us with oximeters, not for our personal use, but to deliver this to hospitals who are in need of these oximeters to permit the nurses to be able to assess their patients appropriately. So investment is really a broad area that we all need to think about and we all need to work on.
Yep. Martin also wants to react to this question of investment and the theme for the year.
So investing on self doesn't just apply to nurses, it applies to everyone. Not related to them in one way or the other, they're not going to give you a loan for a business. And that's very challenging for young people who are nurses and are willing to become entrepreneurs. Number one, I would challenge them to, join the politics. How many nurses run for office in Cameroon? Because the change in policy will begin with us inserting ourselves into that government. How many nurses run for office? The second thing will be, ask yourself in your current position, do I like this job? If not, why don't you like the job? What aspect do I like most about this current position? What aspect of my current job do I enjoy the least? Is there a specific population of patients that I prefer to work with? Do I enjoy sales? Ask those questions. Do a feasibility study for yourself. And then decide, perhaps I should become my own boss. Nursing is it's a career that has endless opportunities. You can decide to go into nursing informatics. You can take those courses online and start providing care from your own room in Cameroon, even in the United States. You can do nursing informatics and you will get a job out here in America. You can decide to become a nurse coach. I don't know if these organizations are already maybe preaching on that, but I'm going to say it out there to the nurses that are asking, what else can I do apart from bedside nursing to make money? You can become a career coach. You can begin to mentor young students that are coming up and want to become a nurse. You can charge a fee to the parents if they want to send their kids through medicine or to become a nurse. You can become that career coach and charge a fee from a critical state. And when they pass this on, they are able to embalm that patient and get that patient ready to be laid in state. And you get paid privately. That's a business you can do. And if you do it right, it will sell for itself. You can be a nurse blogger. There are a lot of opportunities. And I'm going to say this. If you're watching and you're wondering how you can go about this, you have 3 presidents and a CEO on this call. Contact Mr. Liu and they will reach out to us. I don't mind to mentor you into establishing a successful business in nursing.
Okay. Thank you very much, Martin, for wanting to help young Cameroonians. Good evening, Mr. Liu. I think a nurse is like a second god, but it is always on the contrary in public health centers or hospitals where nurses don't understand the importance of their services. Rene is writing from Yaoundé. Good evening, sir. My name is Leslie. I live in Douala International Nurse Day. What does it mean, sir? Yes, you guys will need to explain this. Good day, Mr. Liu and the panel. The problem is in all directions in Cameroon. We have nurse assistants, HND nurses, SRN nurses, BSc nurses, hospital-trained nurses, master in nursing and PhD holders in nursing, all trained in schools. Only God knows, and all will have to work on person. As if this is not enough, salaries varies from 15,000 francs, which most nurses accept. This is the reason why we have so many paracetamol sellers. The organization is vague, for I am in the association since 12 years and I don't see the need.
Front, but in the hospitals, she reduced the death rate from 42% to 2%.
Okay.
This is a lady we celebrate today not because she manufactured an aircraft, but because she did something very small and so good that reduced the death rate. You imagine in 100 people, 42 were dying. She reduced it to 2. And because of this and others, the International Council of Nurses thought it wise that she should be celebrated, and every other nurse who has also contributed. We say nursing is the backbone of healthcare. Without nurses, you cannot really imagine a hospital functioning well. So we are looking at what Florence Nightingale did to nursing. We are also looking at what other nurses have contributed to the healthcare system. And it's basically why we are celebrating the International Nurses Day. And during this time, we also use the opportunity, like we are doing now, to look at some of those things that we do, which are wrong, to look at some of those aspects which we can improve in and do things better for the patients whom we serve.
Okay, for the persons that we are serving. In every sick person, gaining his or her health back is the work of a nurse. In every dying patient is the work of the nurse. In fact, the nurse work spans life cycle from Ngang Laborious, senior nurse from Lime. Good evening to you. Hey, Mr. Leo, what an interesting topic today. I myself, a retired nurse, is in accordance with what my colleagues in the studio are saying. I worked first as an assistant midwife before retiring as a state registered nurse after 29 years of faithful service in just one subdivision, Achu in Donga Mantung, recording no query from hierarchy, no maternal in service after assisting over 1,000 women during delivery, married with 6 children, but is still to have recognition from the government as well as regularization, family allowance despite several fruitless trips to Ewane. Very discouraging. I am Pa Emma in Kumbu. Good evening to you, Pa Emma, and we wish you celebrate the day of tomorrow. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Kudos to all our nurses who have worked diligently to save lives. But I have a worry. The manner in which some of these nurses have been treated in our crisis-rocked communities leaves a lot to be desired. In Bui Division, precisely the rights of nurses have been abused by soldiers and separatist fighters. Che Dinui, writing from Fumban. Yes, rights are not respected. Good evening, Mr. Leo. I just want to say thank you to the nurses all over the for their efforts. I acknowledge their hard work. As what do you wish to see change in the nursing profession before we celebrate next year's International Day?
Well, that's a powerful question. It's been my wish ever since I became the president of Cameroon Association of Registered Nurses and Midwives, how I wish this happens before we celebrate next year, like you say, next Nurses Day. A regulatory body. Most of the problems we have outlined here, it's because we lack a typical regulatory body in the nursing profession in Cameroon. Some people get confused between the various associations that exist, and think that maybe it's the Ideal Nurses, which is the regulatory body. It is the Cameroon Association of Critical Care Nurses, which is the regulatory body. It is the Cameroon Association of Registered Nurses and Midwives, which is the regulatory body. No. Each country or countries where we actually have nursing functioning, we have one regulatory body and as many associations as possible. If we have this regulatory body, which is what we are fighting for, then a lot, and of course, we'll go for as cheap as nothing. These persons are not actually nurses. And I use this opportunity to challenge any nurse, any student nurse, that for you to give a gap from the crowd and be paid in a way that you yourself decide, you need to be good at what you do. And that is not just being a robot in nursing, because what we have more today is nurses who just follow instructions. And those are nurses who have concentrated on just doing things without reasoning. Because one of the nursing models says, for you to be a good nurse, you need a 3H. The heart, the hands, and the head. There is that passion which is needed. And of course, your hands, which does the job with the skills. But then most importantly too, your head.
Okay.
And with this, I think we will be in a position where we command our own prices because we are good at what we do.
Good evening, Mr. Liu and the nurses in the studio. Happy International Nurses Week to Mr. and Mrs. Agbo and to Mr. Ngang Nelson. God bless their efforts. Madam Kongo Armstrong writing from Yaoundé. Good evening, Mr.
Purpose-driven life as a nurse. Challenging nurses to focus on themselves, greater self-awareness, self-esteem, self-concept that can help them to be able to be the best versions of themselves. And also we are organizing leadership workshops in partnership with other sister associations to help nurses to be able to understand the value of mentorship and coaching. Senior nurses should be able to mentor and coach junior ones to a successful career in as far as nursing is concerned. We encourage nurses to always keep an eye on the Ideal Nurses magazine, which is a wonderful resource to encourage nurses to learn other skills that otherwise they cannot learn within the classroom or as they practice. It is very important that they read continuous professional development. Also, one of the dreams that we have for nursing in this country is to be able to mentor and coach emerging nurse leaders towards not only being the best of themselves, but also helping younger ones, leaving behind successors that can create an impact in as far as nursing is concerned. We encourage nurses, especially those in the clinical sector, to practice more of the independent nursing functions. Use their nursing care plan in the care of patients and clients such that they can become satisfied, identify problems in real time, and provide adequate solutions. We encourage employers
to help them for a better growth of our health sector. But that which bothers my mind is the petty nursing sectors everywhere and training centers. How can someone with an advanced level certificate in history and geography and later take a course for 9 months, then call himself a nurse? Most at times they don't even know what they are doing because of no basics, no good training, facilitating patients' death. Amagbo writing from Yaoundé. I'm sure that is also some of the concerns you raised already when it comes to the training. Yes, the critical guys, you want more material, equipment, you want more investment in your domain.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Liu. First of all, I want to say that since 2013, We have done a lot of innovations as far as critical care is concerned. We became members of the World Federation of Critical Care Nurses since 2013. We became members organization to the World Federation of Pediatric Intensive and Critical Care Society since 2013. We also drove the initiative to found what we call the African Federation of Critical Care Nurses, and it was officially launched in 2017. And we have been trying to do shorter courses to provide quality training to as many nurses as possible and physicians. And we are hoping that between now and the next Nurses Day, we should have trained more nurses. We should have created opportunities for nurses to get jobs as far as critical care services are concerned, because we also work with local hospitals in partnership.
Investment is there, everything is there. But we are here, we have to survive. What is the advice you have for fellow nurses back here?
First, my heart goes out that last question. For the nurse that's being exploited by whoever, I would personally suggest that they, instead of even going to their supervisor within the hospital, because it could be a conspiracy, they need to get the law involved. Get a lawyer that will give you legal counsel on how to maneuver that and get your pay and possibly back pay for your money that you've lost. I'm very upset or pissed off with that kind of exploitation for someone who is working and not getting paid. Overall, the advice I will give nurses, and shout out to all my volunteers that are in Cameroon. Caring Hands Africa is still working, and I really want to see you guys again. Luis, if you're listening, and the rest, text all my nurses, let them know that I'm sending love. The advice I will give nurses in Cameroon is that always never forget that the way you treat a patient, they might forget your name, but they will never forget how you treated them. And don't give up. Don't give up because of the obstacles that you face in Cameroon. You might be finding yourself in a valley of no return where you feel like there's no hope in your profession. But with these three young men, Daniel and Nche, that I on this panel, they gave me hope. I didn't even know that they have organizations like that in Cameroon. So that has given me hope. And because I'm having hope, I'm also encouraging you in Cameroon to not give up. Contact these organizations. Hit me up. Let's see how we can make your situation different.
Okay.
Let's see how we can.
Mr. Martin, my namesake, and other colleagues, thank you for coming, Mr. Ngang Peter Achu, President, Ideal Nurses Association.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leo, for giving us this wonderful opportunity. Thank you to all the co-panelists. Of course, caring is the very essence of nursing.
Okay.
And for us to succeed, we must care. And a happy International Nurses Day to all the wonderful and dedicated nurses out there.
Mr. Ntongiachu Daniel, President, Cameroon Association of Critical Care Nurses, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. We continue to beg on everyone to try to sacrifice as much as they can to be able to drive this profession to move to the next steps. Thank you.
Okay. And also to you, Geh Martin Alang, CEO, founder of Caring Hands Africa. Thank you for participating in today's edition of Prime Hour. Okay, the PS is gone. We also want to thank